Hello world! Cue all the heavy equipment in keeping with what's going on. They've been cutting down, not cutting down, they've been removing limbs from trees in the neighborhood all week. The city has been doing that, part of their maintenance thing. Um, that's kind of what we've been hearing. This is Patricia O'Connor of Patricia O'Connor and Frida Reba Darcy fame, and we are the Bonsai Balcony, and this is our balcony. And here's my counterpart Frida. She's in the dark. Okay. Another beautiful blue sunny day in Alameda, California. Yesterday was quite warm. Today they said it would be warmer. It feels warmer to me, although that might be psychological because the same weather forecast that said today would be warmer than yesterday is now saying that today is not as hot as it was yesterday, but it feels warmer. Maybe they just set me up for it. I don't know. But it's quite warm up here. It's early. And our frame of focus right now is on two things. One, our little trees. We have a couple of things going on with our little pine trees. And they overlap on some of the trees, and some of the trees they don't. For instance, these are ponderosas. They're single flush pines. So this one needs to have its ball gold put on it. I don't see any ball gold on there. And this one needs to have it refreshed, and this one needs to have it refreshed. This little tree right here needs to lose its ball gold. Why? Why would it lose its ball gold? For the same reason that this one loses its ball gold. If the tree is in a bonsai pot and we're intending to do the candles 30 days before we do our candles, you just hang out. 30 days before we do our candles, you just hang out. You're a single flush, this doesn't pertain to you. You're also in a training pot, this wouldn't pertain to you. But if it's a multi-flush pine, and we're intending to do our candles this year, you just got repotted. This doesn't pertain to you. This pertains to you. Then we pick up our substrate, we pick up our fertilizer 30 days before we do our candles. And what that does is that allows our trees to run that fertilizer through their system. And in so doing, when we do our candles cutting 30 days from now, there will not be an abundance of resources for which the tree will be able to make new, longer candles. When we do the candle cutting, it will respond by replacing those candles with new candles, and it'll make more of them. And there will not be enough energy for those new candles to grow needle-wise as long as their first round. And so by picking up their fertilizer now, this one's on restriction. We're trying to save this tree, and it's trying to give up the ghost on us, although the center is showing a little bit of promise. I'm not going to do the candles on this one. That's a ponderosa. It doesn't count. We will be doing our candles on this little roddy. So right now, on the trees, where we're going to go through and clean and cut our candles in 30 days, this is the time that we go through 30 days ahead of that and pick up their bottle gold. And just like that, I think that's it. All of these guys can continue to get fed. All of those guys can continue to get fed. All the ponderosas can continue to get fed. Anybody who has just been freshly repotted can continue to hang out there and get fed. Otherwise, is there anything left in here? There is not. There's not. I need to refill my water and come back and get this guy and this guy and this guy. They look dry already. Now, I said there were two things. The first thing was that we're going to go through and pick up our biogold on the trees that we are going to cut the candles on. That has just happened. And the second thing that we need to do is we need to be mindful. We need to be really, really mindful, especially with this many little pines in this many tiny little pots. I have a lot of my trees in these trays with substrate. A few of them were acting as though they didn't like the same amount of water that most of the other trees were getting. And for that reason, maybe the temperatures were still cool. Maybe they weren't, maybe they had an abundance of soil in there for their roots haven't grown out fully yet or something. So, whereas all the other trees were drinking up all the water in a 24-hour period and ready to go again the next day, a few of them weren't, and they were looking a little prolonged yellow. So maybe I would move them out of the tray and put them here, right? Or maybe I would put them in a place where the substrate tends to stay a little drier so that they can get a little drier. Because, I'm thinking in terms of last week or week before last. It's still cool and they are taking up water in a springtime way, but they're not going whole hog the way they will later when it warms up. Well, now it's warmed up. And anything we've done to try to even things out for the trees that aren't taking up water as long, we need to be especially mindful of. We need to be especially mindful of those guys which will definitely be needing their little hedge against the heat. And that's what this is. This needs to be in place and they need to be in it and acclimated whenever now gets here, because here it is. And that's something that we need. That's something that I'm just speaking of in a mindful sense. We're all going, even if right now what you're going through is still some kind of winter-like conditions, we are about to get to those little transition periods. And those of you who have mame trees probably used a little substrate things. And like me, you probably noticed that certain times of the year they work a little too well. And so you back off on your watering or you move them out of those trays for now. But now is the time when the season flips. Here's all bets are off. Everybody needs to be in place with their little hedges against high heat, underneath them raring to go. Yeah, so that's what's going on. That's what's going on there. While we're here, we'll just look in on a few things. I'm still looking for roots under here. It's just been a couple of weeks. Nobody's overdue yet. But the trident maple is looking good. Our pines are looking good for the most part. Most of our pines are looking great. The pines that we would worry about most, especially, are looking good. This is the one that's been through a whole lot this year. It's been styled, it's been moved, it's been transported, and it has also had some grafting work done. And it's responding well to being fed. Yeah, there's all the loud machines that were waiting for us to start rolling. That's a chipper, one of those machines that reduces plant matter that they've just cut into sawdust chips, basically, that you hear. Anyway, I guess that would be our nemesis. Yeah. So I'm just panning in on my Ponderosa because, golly, I just, like a star-struck child, I can't take my eyes off of this tree. And all that bow gold I have on there, what I'm really looking forward to is this thing has spent all of its years up until basically now, um, growing this beautiful tree in this beautiful shape. Here's my job: feed, 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 propagate those grafts that we see, those little pieces of green tape up there of grafts underneath them. Propagate those guys to their full extent. Do everything they need to be happy and healthy. If we get the tape off and see that any of those guys are still, and if they're not, we'll regraft it. Or when I say we, I mean I'll pay somebody to regraft it. I don't want to be learning how to graft on my cool Yamadori. But the main thing I'm looking forward to doing is the next couple of years is fattening this guy up. In the couple of years that I've had both of my oaks, I've seen them put on some weight around their waistline, and that's absolutely welcome. I would love to see this guy fatten up, and whenever that happens, I would also probably see some of those spiral lines in the bark that you kind of begin to notice the more you look at the tree. I would also expect some of those to kind of get bigger and more defined, lend themselves to how we would like to do our sharis. Basically, if it fattens up, some of that bark will split a little bit, showing some of these lines. There are already lines there, right? And as the tree gets fatter, these lines would become more pronounced, and that could tell us how to make some really cool natural looking sharis. And a shari is where you kind of peel the bark away and expose the base of the tree, and it silvers like this. Speaking of this and this, I don't know how well you can see it. Let me see how close I can get in there. I think you can probably see that there is a tool. I'm focusing in on these. I love the shape of both of these gins. The gin is what you see there. That is a piece of limb that's been being used as a deadwood feature. Now, they would turn that color with being bleached out. When I got this tree, this was still very kind of green looking and sappy, and it's going to look, it was so full of sap that's going to look like resin when it dries out. And there's another, I think I'm showing another gin on top. But what I was wanting you to notice here is what I think you can see are there tool marks all in there. There is a tool that whenever you get bonsai tools not for the first time, whenever you get bonsai tools, they always offer up, or whenever you'll see offered up, something that looks kind of like a potato peeler or something, and it leaves marks like that. So what wouldn't have left marks would be that branch with all the foliage cut off and allowed to die, and then allow the bark to fall off on its own over time, which would mean that would still kind of look probably just been a couple of years, I'm guessing. So it would probably still look kind of flaky and still kind of chunky. It may get cool looking on its own like that, but that's a different look than the exposed wood, almost juniper, the way they do those deadwoods and stuff. But to be sure, I have to be careful and think about how I get rid of those little flat lines. This is our thing about fertilizer, but now I'm going off on a tangent on deadwood. I realize that. But yeah, I'm going to have to try to sand that down. At first I thought steel wool, fine steel wool, but that would leave metal all stuck all in those little wood fibers and stuff. It would make wood fibers that would leave that fuzzy with steel wool in the end. So I think it would have to be some really fine sandpaper, but I don't want to replace one tool mark with sand marks. It would have to look, you know, it would have to look natural. And whereas wood does have a grain that kind of runs long ways, on pine that tends to be fine, 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 fine. On bald cypress, you can almost see the grain as little tubes, as bundles of tubes. I don't think pines look like that quite as much. You can kind of see the fibers to it. So it would have to be maybe sandpaper that has a grit equivalent to what the spacing of the fiber is to look natural or something. Those are just some thoughts on some work I'm going to have to do to make that to make our gin or our deadwood look convincing and not machined. In the meantime, I'm also putting thought into the sharis that I think would be really, really pretty. And the sharis, like I said, are the little stripes that appear in wood whenever they expose, whenever the bark gets taken away by something. A lot of times in the wild, sun exposure baking one part of the tree, it'll be bent in such a way to where maybe it's flat to the sun, turned straight on at some angle to the sun to where that part's just beaming on it. And so that kind of cooks that little area. And as the tree grows, that area moves down the tree so that you get a place where the bark is weaker there, and then the wind comes along and takes that off, or the sun bakes that and causes it to curl up like a potato chip or something. And then after that, it's gone. And then as the tree grows or twists or whatever, that line just keeps marching right on up or down the trunk of the tree. So yeah, that's kind of just how all of that gets going and gets moving. And I'm really looking forward to being able to work with the aesthetics of this ponderosa. But meanwhile, that's not really our game. Right now, our game with this single flush Yamadori long needle pine is to feed, water. They don't like as much water as black pines, for instance, but they're supposed to be water resistant, but that's not in a bonsai. Drought resistant, but that's not what you would really think about when it's in a bonsai pot. If we water it more, it'll grow longer needles and photosynthesize more. If we feed it, it'll grow longer needles and photosynthesize more. That will lead to more roots. That will lead to more back buds, which will lead to more needles, which will lead to, and that's, if we eventually wanted to get the needles short, you do that for a couple of years, and then about the third round of needle growth starts to come out shorter because it will have made so many, it can't keep up the production of needles that it's making and the length that it would like to have them at, so they just naturally start getting shorter because it's in a bonsai pot. This one is not, so it would take longer for that to happen. Also, we're going to take care of our needle length, hopefully by grafting a species on here that has shorter needles. In the meantime, the part where the tree is thriving and making candles and just doing all this other stuff is absolutely great. Glad to see it. So I'm going to wrap that up here. We have gone through and picked up all of our lumps of biogold on our trees that we are planning on doing the candle cutting on in June. And because we're planning on doing that in early to mid-June, we start taking up our fertilizer 30 days before that in early to mid-May, which it is now. And with that going, then I just wanted to give everybody a reminder that our heat is going up here, which makes me have to be mindful about where everybody is sitting, whether or not they were cheating a little inside or outside of their drip trays. We certainly need to be leaning on our drip trays now, and we need to make sure that nobody is outside that little tray looking in, because from here on out we can expect temperatures more like what we're seeing now. Even if it turns back to 60 tomorrow, it'll be days like today will be creeping in and out without us even knowing it sometimes. So from this point, I would expect our water intake on all of our little trees to accelerate. Anybody who's been getting as much water as the other guys and have decided that they want to be a little yellow over it will now start playing. We'll start playing the game a little closer. They should all start vaping off all of that, vaping off all of their uptake of resources faster. So that's that. We picked up our fertilizer, and we're going to make sure everybody from here on out is in a little, if they're tiny, in a tiny little pot, we're going to make sure that they've got their little tray with some substrate underneath them to protect them, and we're going to make sure that everybody that still needs to be fed is getting fed. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Frida appreciates you. Like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. Our next drop will be probably just closer to the weekend when we get ready to do our weekend drops, and then of course we do our Saturday Night Live bonsai, which I'm really enjoying doing and looking forward to doing more of. And thank you so much for watching.